We have a named one. So we have a named param that we need to pass. Now, when we're doing that, we have to come inside of the any when it's named and say named, right? And we put in the name of the param. In this case, name. In this case, avatar. This is how it works. This is just convention. You don't have to beat yourself up over it. If you don't remember it, come back and look the format for it again. So now we're saying that whenever someone contacts the president, says, listen, sir, I need you to create a user for me, right? What should the president tell them? Now, Mr. President, we want to hijack your response and we want to say dot then. Now we have three versions. We have then throw, we have then answer, and we have a then return. The then throw will come in handy when we're trying to force the dependency to throw an error, because we want to test what happens when an error occurs, right? But this isn't the case. We want to test what happens when it's successful, basically, right? So when it throws, when it's successful, right, then answer, right? It should then answer or then return. Then return works when this function is not async, right? So because of this function is actually an asynchronous function, we can see it's a future function, right? We need to use then. We need to use then answer, right? So then return would be for a function that is not. We're not expecting or we don't want to wait for it, right? If we want to wait for the thing to complete, like a future, and then we simply say then answer, right? We use then answer, so answer after. So store a function which is called when this method stub is called, right? So it hijacks this method, so whenever it's called, this answer will be given, right? So now what type of answer is create user given? Create user is given a void, right? So how do we mimic void? So we need to put this. So this takes an invocation. This is some high level stuff. We're not going to be needing it, so we're just going to put in that, and then we'll return something. So we can return void, but then now you have to remember async. We're going to put async before this. So now we have to remember though, right? Oh, what is the problem? It's your problem. Done. Did what identifier? Let's see. Yeah, so you can see that the return type null, so it's actually returning void, right? So the return type null is not a future either value. So this doesn't just want one value, right? So we're expecting an either right or left value. So in our case, because we want to mimic success, right, we will rather use the right, because the right, mostly conventionally, we put the success on the right and the failure on the left. So when it's the right hand side, so we want to return a right hand side answer. The right hand side is from the darts package, right? So right hand is a subclass of the either. So an either can either return a left or a right. So when it's a left, we know it's a failure. When it's a right, in our case, it's a failure. When it's a right, we know it's successful, because in our case, we've put failure on the left and success on the right. So when this gets called, we want the president to say, you're right, you have success. And what type of success is the right expecting? It's expecting a void. But we can't put void in here. So whenever you have a void function, inside of your right, you put null, right? Because it's void. So we can't just put void in there. So we put constant right null. So whenever someone calls create user on your repository, we want you to give them back a right answer. Alright, so now that's us setting up hijacking. This is called stubbing. So for our arrangement, we stub. We're hijacking the president's response to whenever this function gets called, this particular function gets called. So now we act, right? So we can say that our use case, we invoke it and we have to act, right? We have to pass it the params. Now we have to create the params. We have to come here, final. No, let me create that right here. Final params is equal to create user params. Now we have to do this over and over if we have multiple stuff. So in order to just make this simpler, for every class, what I personally do is, for every class that I create, I add an empty constructor. So constant create user params dot empty. All right, and what does this do? This will return this class, right? You can just do this. You can change it to a factory constructor and do this, and it returns create user params, and then you pass in the default values. But I prefer to do it this way. So I will return this, and this will have created that, and I will pass that I don't know, empty string. The name will also be an empty string, and the avatar empty string. You can name it anything, you can do anything you want with them. You can just put them and just leave them empty, or you can use their names, empty dot created at whatever you want to do, but it's up to you. But I'm just creating these because I don't want to have to always invoke create new versions of create user params each time I'm writing a test for whatever uses it. So I'm also going to do the same thing for my user. So where's my user? So I'm going to go into entities. For my user, I'm actually going to create a constant user.empty. This I'm going to do ID will be 1. Created at will be empty.created at. I'm going to do the same for name. Right, so let's go back here. And here, so my params will simply be create user params.empty. Right, so that will create a user params for me. I don't have to always instantiate it with empty values anymore.